Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today's going to be a rather fun video. You see, Cubicle 7 have just released their new book for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay titled Winds of Magic. And I've been waiting for this book for a really long time now since they announced it because, well, it's the Winds of Magic. A lot of us are quite curious and there were some subjects that they said that they were going to cover, which they have, and those subjects are quite important at the very least. So today we're going to be focusing around a certain point of this book. We're going to talk about some new lore, some changes to the lore, and something really cool. But before we jump in, I do apologize if I'm slow with replies today. It is my birthday, so I've got the usual family stuff to do and all that, and, you know, just the usual insanity. But with all that being said, let's just jump right in. So this video is going to focus around the Incarnate Elemental. We have some new lore, not only on the three that we have access to, that we've had from miniatures and just general rules, because some of them were minis, some of them just never got released, but also a few others. So let's read the first two paragraphs here as it's more general stuff and go into the other stuff later. When magic reaches high concentrations in the environment, or when a storm of magic gathers, wizards may dare to summon the purest and most destructive essence of one of the winds of magic and bind it to the shape of spirit creatures forged of tempestuous force. These incarnate elementals are manifestations of limited sentience, embodying the characteristics of a particular magical wind. The phenomena that create incarnate elementals are poorly understood. They embody a certain quintessence of the wind with which they are associated, but they tend to only display the most destructive aspects of that wind. Furthermore, only 3 incarnates have been properly documented, with codified summoning rituals recorded to conjure them. These are the incarnates of fire, death, and beasts. These colossal monsters have been summoned by battle wizards of the Amber, Bright, and Amethyst colleges after lengthy and complicated rites that take place at ritual sites, arcane fulcrums, or magically saturated environments. Monstrous elements occasionally manifest independently at places where concentrations of a particular wind are abundant, such as the incarnate elemental of beasts that are occasionally found deep within the Falschlag rock. Okay, so this is basic stuff. Again, we only find out information of 3 at the very moment. There's still a little bit more information, but as far as I'm aware, they were only able to be summoned in older lore, and now apparently they can summon on their own right, which is something very strange. Either way, it kind of makes sense because, you know, if magic gets a bit too volatile, this can actually happen. But the main reason I wanted to cover this is because of the 3rd paragraph, so let's start reading that. Many other forms of elemental are thought to exist. Sailors have reported seeing creatures formed purely out of water and are supposed by scholars of magic to be incarnate elementals of life. The Ungals and Hobgoblins who rove the eastern steppes tell of wind demons that some suppose may be incarnates of light. The Ifrits said to haunt the southern deserts resemble elementals in a lesser aspect. The Gospodars speak of their gods manifesting as massive bears formed of rock and ice. Tales of creatures made of living rock or metal are shared by miners and mountaineers. Altdorf's wizards would dearly love to find out if such tales would have any truth to them, and if so, whether these beings might be incarnate elementals of winds other than Gur, Akshi, and Shaiish. So, this is why we need to talk about this, because this is really curious. So when we talk about, say for example, the light demon, that's something that we kind of expected with the Eastern Steppes. It's really curious that we've gotten a little bit more information on the Ifrits too, because we know they exist, but it's been kind of old lore. So the Ifrits themselves were considered to be the demons that would be around the areas of Araby, and this is now further confirmed, but it seems that they're also focused around the lore of life. Well, this is speculation, keep in mind, because these books are written in the perspective of, say, for example, a wizard at the Colleges of Magic who's just putting down his forts. So this is really interesting, mainly because, once again, it further cements Araby and it ties them to an elemental wind. It kind of makes sense that they have the lore of light, but still, it's very curious, and I hope it's not too long until we start hearing more about that. What's curious is that there's still Ungals in the Eastern Steppes, because to my understanding, they mostly all fled to where Kislev is now, because we know that the Ungolds and the Gospodar were pushed out. It's a very curious thing, but maybe it's because new lore is going to come out, especially with Warhammer the Old World on the way. So, yeah, who knows? Then, obviously, they've cemented the fact that the bear, the elemental bear, we've got this in Warhammer 3, might be some sort of elemental, which is strange. Because, well, the Law of Ice and all that is not really one of the 8 main winds, but maybe it's going to act like a sub thing. It's really, really curious. It's making me think like a lot of different stuff, and this is great. I'm all for it. Especially then when we go to the Elemental of Life, which is formed purely by water, and we know that there's been hints about future stuff with Marienburg. So, yeah, this is really, really curious. It raises a lot of questions which the theory crafter in me is trying to just, like, make comprehensive. I can't wait to see what more comes out from this, because Cubicle 7 always do fantastic lore writings. I've always been a massive fan of these guys. So, let's hope we don't have to wait too long for this. Especially about anything regarding some Ifrits. That would be, very, very special. So before we end this video, what we're going to do is look at the Incarnate Elementals that we do know of, as they've had a bit of a rewrite for their lore. We've also got some really nice artwork, like actually properly looking at them, because the army book that they were part in, the supplement, was all black and white, and you couldn't really get a good look at them. Obviously, they do have miniatures, but getting your hands on those minis is next to impossible at this point, unless you go for a recast. As you can imagine, we're going to start off with the Incarnate Elemental of Fire. Actually is the most wantonly destructive of all the winds of magic, all-consuming and insatiably hungry. It is said that the Incarnate Elementals of Fire born from it possess a terrible wrath and fury only matched by demons, known in magical lore as the Charred Ones, the Black Harvesters, and Jackal Cinders. The Incarnate Elemental of Fire towers over the battlefield. It possesses a lean and terrible form, cinder black and ash strewn, from which phenomenal heat radiates. Few can withstand the element's wrath, and it can unleash a firestorm that turns armor into molten slag and causes artillery to explode, sending red-hot shards of metal slicing through the air and the flesh of those who stand nearby. These are pretty grim, but they're really, really cool. Let's continue. Incarnate Elementals of Fire are so destructive and difficult to control that they are rarely seen. Even the more reckless Magisters of the Bright Order, an organization with no shortage of rash practitioners, are reluctant to summon one, even in dire circumstances. Despite their reputation, these towering monsters enjoy the curious affection of many peasants who live on the Bretonnian side of the Grey Mountains. This is again some established lore that we know some of them exist, and there are different fonts of magical energy which will bring them into existence, but it's still cool that we're getting a little bit more of, yes, they're still canon type of thing. This is why I want to cover them. They place effigies of burned wood outside their hovels, and thanks to a mysterious warlock who once summoned a score of Black Harvesters to defeat a horde of rampaging undead horrors. Local barons tear down the effigies if they find them. They claim the tales are seditious lies, but the scorched and blackened fortresses that dot the region provide evidence to the contrary. This is pretty cool. Again, lore that we already know, but it's still cementing them in the lore, which is something really important, because I don't know what the official stance with the Monstrous Arcanum is, and obviously it's been a while since we have new Warhammer Fantasy lore, so this is quite important. Next, we're going to look towards the Incarnate Elemental of Death. Those who seek to summon an Incarnate Elemental of Death risk their own destruction, for to conjure this entity is to beckon death itself into the world. The Incarnate Elemental of Death is a terrifying apparition burying the heads of lean and hungry dragons at either end of a massive and twisted serpentine body. Although it is monstrous in proportion, the elemental makes no sound save for a soft susurrus, the eerie whisperings of the grave following in its wake. Unlike other Incarnate Elementals, the Incarnate Elemental of Death is known by no other names, for it is rarely conjured, and those who know how to call it forth, the Spiriters of the Amethyst Order, are too respectful of it to refer to it as anything other than what it is. The Incarnate Elemental of Death is bound to the mortal realm by the power held within a rare Shais Horologe, a enchanted hourglass that contains the dust of a monarch's bones. It serves as a powerful arcane focus, and this artifact alone can contain the straining power of such an unnatural entity. Those versed in the lore of Shaish claim that anyone who meets the gaze of an Incarnate Elemental of Death witnesses their own destruction, but those who get so close are surely lost already. Rearing up on its sinuous body, the elemental strikes with a speed few can escape, crushing its foes beneath the coils of its twisting body or ripping them apart with its monstrous jaws. It's just one of the coolest things, and I'm glad that we finally have some proper look at the artwork, just some colored artwork, so we can just see more or less what we're supposed to think of, because we never had the mini, but this is just super cool. And lastly, we have the Incarnate Elemental of Beasts. Incarnate Elemental of Beasts are summoned into the world through powerful and complicated rituals enacted by practitioners of amber magic. A great totem formed of beast skulls and freshly flensed pelts is required to power these rituals, leading amber wizards to refer to the creature as the Bloody Hidesman. Other names for this titanic entity are the Horned Man and the Faceless Hunter. The elemental is a gigantic humanoid figure, swollen with powerful muscles and crisscrossed with sinews like whipcords. Its head is a skull armed with saber teeth and sweeping antlers. Its foreclaws are an eagle's talons, and it rears up on hind legs like those of a lion. The elemental contains within it the spirit of numberless predators, animalistic and cruel, unrestrained and bloodthirsty. It seeks to chase down anything that it regards as entering its territory, maul them until their struggles cease, and then glut itself upon their body and blood. The elemental's howling fills those who hear it with terror, awakening in them an ancestral memory of the might of primal predators. If memory serves, this one was the most common that you'd see in the tabletop. Mind you, the elementals were still very rare. I don't believe that the Incarnate Elemental of Death was ever released or shown to the public. I know there are pictures of the Elemental of Fire, but when it comes to Death, I've seen that one myself. Not Death, sorry, Beasts. Beasts I've seen myself, because it was one of the more interesting ones, and I believe it was on the Forge World website for a while. It's one of these things where this is during a period that Games Workshop would release rules but not models, which you'd think they'd learn after that massive lawsuits, but hey, I'm just happy that we got a little bit more lore, and yes, a lot of stuff was repeated from former books, but it just gave a little bit more context, especially because it brings stuff back into the canon that we didn't even know if they stayed in the canon or not. It's a very weird thing, especially with Age of Sigmar having its own Incarnate Elemental, which is kind of the same, but also very drastically different, so there was a lot of things that were confusing, but what do you guys think about this? I do highly recommend checking out the Winds of Magic book by Cubicle 7. It is really good. There'll likely be a few more videos about this book coming out in the days to come. I've just obviously only wanted to do one today so I could actually, celebrate my birthday. But until then, let me know what you know in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion.